You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Hi, everybody. I'm Doc Martin on Maximum Medicine. And my guest tonight, we're going to be so excited because she's got beautiful things to share with us. Nancy Myers, and she is an orb medium. She has a deep relationship with orbs. We'll hear all about that. Nancy, welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
So what I know about Nancy, and she's going to tell us more, she's a Reiki master and she reads oracle cards, and she is an author, and she has a podcast, The Spheres of Spirit. But her connection with orbs came in a very personal way, a very sad way, but came through that with such incredible beauty. So I want to hear Nancy tell us about how she started seeing, connecting with, talking to orbs.
Okay. Yeah, it was a bit of a sad part in the beginning, but isn't that how spirit cracks us open sometimes? My son passed unexpectedly in 2010, 2 days before his 28th birthday. It was a series of being sick and the wrong medicines and too much cold medicines is what happened, and he floated right out of his body. Shortly after that, maybe 4 or 5 months after he crossed, I went to a medium for the first time ever in my life. And, I just needed to know that he was okay. And I had always believed in the other side. I always wished that I had the ability to contact the other side, but at this point I had nothing. So I went to the medium, and she said, "Oh, your son is here." And I said, "Oh, he is." And she said, "You brought him. I didn't." And I went, "Oh," because I thought the medium brought. She said, "No, he's with you." But she proceeded to give me some lovely validations and some lovely messages. And then she said to me, "Have you ever heard of orbs?" I said, "Well, no, not really." And she said, "Your son is telling me that that's your work together." She said, "You are going to start capturing orbs, and your mission is to heal people. You will heal people on this side, and he will heal people on his side." And I went, "Okay." And so I went home. My thing was, okay, I went to hear that he was okay. As mom, we want to know our children are safe and happy and healthy, right? Even if it's on the other side. But then when he told me that our mission was to do this work, even though I knew nothing about it, had never captured an orb in my life, dutiful mom, I said, okay, I'll do this. So I got a little digital camera and I just started taking pictures. And pretty soon the orbs started showing up. First, they were just little gray spots, and I was so excited. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to save this picture and this picture, but thinking it was going to be few and far between. Well, I took pictures every single day. And pretty soon the orbs started to change. They got bigger. They got more colorful. They got patterns in them. And then they started to change again. And I could see faces. And I went, well, this is interesting. So I kept at it. And then somebody asked me, everybody knew about my orbs at this point. I was relentless in sharing, look. And when I started getting the faces, everybody thought, well, that was really cool. But at that time, I was the only one who could see them. I had to describe it to people. Well, I had a friend of my son's, and she said, there's a person here who Robbie knew. My son's name was Robbie, and he lost his brother, and he's having a really hard time. She said, do you think if you could take a picture of him and get an orb? Okay. So I took a picture, and this young man was in front of me. Now, this younger man, I have to tell you this because he was bald, totally bald. His head, what little hair he had, he shaved it. So, just totally bald. So I took a picture of him, and I could see this young man in the orb. But he had dreadlocks. But he told me he was his brother. And that was kind of the beginning of really communicating with the orb. And he wanted me to thank his brother because, and he showed me a wheelchair, and his brother confirmed through tears that his brother had a terrible accident, and he was paralyzed, and he took care of him until the end. And he did have dreadlocks, So the orbs would come in with these faces, Sharon, that they would give me a trait so that if I described it, the sitter would know immediately who it was. Okay, well, your dad's wearing glasses, or this man has a police cap on, or this grandma is wearing pearls. And so that's kind of how it started.
So you got a strong identifier.
Mm-hmm.
And you were given the messages in the symbols and images and language that the person, the client, could immediately get.
Yes. I could, that was the visual part of the orb, was seeing it. But that one time that I just described, that is when it leapt out of the orb. And then I was communicating. It went beyond just what was appearing in the orb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they always come in. Like I brought somebody, I took a picture, and grandma showed up, and I said, okay, I don't mean to be rude, but grandma's showing me she had a really thin, long nose. And they go, oh my God, she was known for her nose.
Yeah.
just to put an exclamation point on it, I think.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I want to talk more about this, but you said two things that I was reflecting before we connected tonight. I was reflecting on how many incredible spiritual unveilings happen after serious emotional, psychiatric, physical hardship. So I'll just, off the top of my head, Eckhart Tolle, severe depression.
Mm-hmm.
A medical intuitive I met recently, Patrice Christofiak, severe depression. Her name was, I think it was it Sylvia? Anyway, a woman, she and her son drowned back in the early 2000s, but didn't actually die. And she wrote a book, Fire the Grid. I don't know if you remember that, way back when.
I'm not familiar with that one.
And then the Rwandan woman who stayed in a bathroom with, I guess, 6 other people through the horrors of that war, months and months in this bathroom, and connected deeply with Jesus. Since you've reflected on this, I'm sure, a million times,
mm-hmm.
What do you think is happening and you're a Reiki master, energetically, that you hit this point of such severe distress, and then things break open deeper than you would have ever imagined?
Yeah, that's something I've thought about. You hear about life contracts. You chose to do this, and I agree. Part of it is a life contract, but if I'm going along and I'm comfortable and I'm leading a very happy life, I'm not going to look deeper. I'm not going to change. If we're comfortable, why would we change? So it's
Right.
almost like we have to be, I don't want to say torn down, but realigned for a minute so that when we come back, we go, okay, there's more to this. And those,
Kicked out of the rut.
yeah, and shaken up enough, if you will, then to force us to go down a different path, and I'll just tell you this, and I don't mean to digress here a little bit or go off the beaten track, but I asked my son one time when COVID first hit, Robbie, why are we going through COVID? And he kiddingly said, yeah, he goes, I know you guys are walking in the stuff. And he goes, and it's terrible. He said, but we on this side are rejoicing. And I went, oh, well, thanks for, being happy in our misery. He said, no, Mom. He said, this will move you along hundreds of years because people are starting to think differently. So that's on a bigger scale than when, we have the individual, but it's the same idea. And then I think too, when we are, and people with NDEs, near death experiences, they come back sometimes changed. It's almost like when we're in the depths of despair or depression or sickness, or we are maybe more malleable. Maybe it's easier then to adjust what spirit needs to adjust because we've kind of surrendered.
Well, I was thinking of it a little bit more in terms of the energy field and and that idea of surrender. Your individual boundaries just drop.
Oh, yeah.
And then there you are at one with the universal field. And then you can pick up all kinds of things. But it is interesting. At the times in my life that I have had the biggest changes, a physical event happened where, and my girlfriend and I talk about this all the time, where I am knocked down in the sense that I am made to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I am made to slow down through a physical event, usually, because I don't listen otherwise.
Yeah.
And just wham. And then out of that comes huge transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happened to me 3 years ago. I was trying to get my second book out and I was procrastinating. And here at home, I tripped over my own big feet, fell, broke my hip, broke my shoulder, slid into the corner of the wall, cracked my head open.
Oh my.
I was down for 6 months. So what did I do? I finished my book. I said, okay.
About that.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my.
But you're right.
This is a good place to take a break, Nancy. So let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, we're back. I'm Doc Martin, Maximum Medicine, here with Nancy Myers, and she communicates with orbs. And we learned last few minutes, out of a really, really painful time, out comes this incredible beauty and connection. But Nancy, not everybody knows what orbs are. Could you take us through that?
I sure can. People ask me, that's like the number one question, what are orbs? Mm-hmm. And I to simplify it, I say they're energy. And why is that? Because what we are energy. And when we shed these physical suits, we revert back to energy. And so when they appear, the orbs, they're showing us the spirit's true essence, if you will. But yet they maintain the visual recognition inside the orb of the loved one that I'm trying to connect with or capture. So even though they've reverted to the orb, to the energy, they still have their personality,
their essence.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. So that we recognize them.
And they started out pretty nondescript for you, but in your books and then in your pictures on your website, The colors are incredible.
You
So
know,
how
and
did that evolve?
yeah, and that was slow coming. Now, this process, I've been doing this for 14 years, so it's been a long process. But it was, I feel like I've built up a relationship with the orbs. My backyard, I can hardly go out in the backyard and take a picture and not get an orb. But so it was working, and I always had faith that they would show up, and they did. And that, when every time I'd think, okay, well, that's as far as I can go, they would show me something new. So what am I talking about? Well, first, like I said, they were the little gray spots. And then the colors started coming in. And then they started in their own way communicating to me that their colors were representative of a feeling or an emotion, or a message. For instance, I took a picture of a man, and there was a big pink orb on his heart. And I knew it was a female. And I said, "Do you have a daughter in spirit?" And, the tears started. And he said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "She's sending you love." That was her visual to her dad. And it was something that he could take, and hold in his hand. We go to mediums a lot, and we get readings, and they go, "Oh, I'm seeing this and I'm seeing that." We can't see it, right? We have to trust them. But sometimes I'll work with mediums and take a picture as they're doing the reading, and there's the orb and the person that the medium is connected to. So it's something concrete. But then now I use just a cheap little camera, and so I never change the setting, but I always leave the flash on. And so with that said, I would take the pictures every night. So I didn't change, the camera didn't change, but the orbs changed. So sometimes they were concentric circles. Sometimes they were this brilliance that spilled over the rims. Sometimes they were what I call spotlight orbs, where you could see through them, and they literally lit up what was behind them. My favorite is what I call my crown jewels, and they look faceted and like they're just encrusted with jewels. Some I call my tortoise. They look like a shell of a tortoise. And then, of course, the faces. Now, I will add that, people say, or I've heard people say, well, orbs are just this, or orbs are just that. And I say, if someone says that, kind of take it with a grain of salt, because the orbs, after 14 years, are still showing me who they are, what they're capable of. So my son has told me, "Mom, this is just the tip of the iceberg."
I'm a story of orbs, obviously not as deep or brilliant as what you have worked with and communicated with. My girlfriend and I took a trip right before Christmas. This was back, gosh, maybe 2007. And we went to Santa Fe and then up to Bandelier Monument Park. And there is kiva and living spaces in the cliff.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
incredible kind of a horseshoe canyon. And we were there late in the afternoon in December. It was cold. Probably we were there at about 2:00, went and sat. And she and I sat down at the kiva and just dropped into meditation. And afterwards, we talked about who we saw. We saw the same elderly Indian woman, described her exactly the same. And on the way back, we're walking back, and there's a creek there, and the mule deer were starting to come out, and it started to snow. And I was taking pictures. And when we got back and I looked at the pictures, there were literally 10s, 20s of these, as you said, just they look like gray spots. But they felt really real to me. And I loved Bandelier. I felt deep connection to Bandelier. And it would be exciting to go back and connect in and see then if my pictures have any change in them. but that was very powerful, moving place. I felt deeply connected to the energies there.
Yeah.
And then I had another experience. They're not orbs, but they were lights. It was one May, and I usually am not a very late night person. So, but I was compelled to get up and look out the window at 10:30 at night. I have a big bay window in the living room. And I was looking at the woods in the back behind my house, and I was feeling very deep yearning to connect with the wood spirits. All of a sudden, and I'm not kidding, there are literally hundreds of small yellow lights zipping back and forth across the front yard, across the vegetable garden, around the barn, zipping and zipping. And, everybody said, oh, it was, a flashlight beam. It was this, it was fireflies. It was this. No, it wasn't.
No, sounds like the elementals.
Yeah. And I would wake up several nights in a row, go to the window, nothing there, say, you guys, I really, really, really want to connect with you. I feel so connected. It felt like spirits out of the woods. And after several minutes of saying, please, all of a sudden they'd start zipping.
Yeah.
And then this went on I did this every May for several years. It just warms my heart to think of the ways that we can connect with spirit.
Oh, spirit is very responsive. And like I said, I think you saw with your own eyes, the elemental world. That's what I said. I built up this relationship, or when I have a client in front of me, I say, call in your loved ones, and you send the love out, you send that invitation out, and they respond. People, I've gotten, of course, loved ones, the angelic realm, but I also guides, angels, teachers, ascended masters, even ETs, and so we connect telepathically and heart to heart. So they probably felt that heart to heart plea from you.
And it was this deep, intense yearning for the connection and the love I have for the land around me. And so I look forward to every May. It feels like the time of the sun and the light. That's a good time for them, because I've tried in August or October. May is, something about May. I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah.
This is a good place to take a quick break.
Okay.
And then we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. I'm Doc Martin, Maximum Medicine, here with Nancy Myers. I want to hear, she began to connect with the orbs, but it was a connection to her son who had passed on. And Nancy, Robbie tells you this is the tip of the iceberg, and now you're deepening into seeing so much. What else does he say about life on the other side?
I'll start with this because after my son crossed, or even now, I tell people, my son crossed. And the first thing they say is, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I have to tell them, I go, I understand and I appreciate, your sincerity and compassion, but I didn't lose him. His physical body's not here, but he is right here. We work together. And I told him, you'd better not ever leave me, because then I'll dissolve into a puddle. But one of the first things that he told me, and through his communications, and I have to say this too, and I hope people understand this, part of Robbie's passing has been an incredible gift. And what do I mean by that? I have learned things and experienced things, and I now know things that I would never have imagined or even investigated before he crossed. And he is also, because I know exactly what's going to happen to us from his point of view, there's no fear of death. And when we can live life without the fear of death, which consumes a lot of our time, then we are able to live in the now. One of Robbie's first directions to me, he loves being in charge of me now and telling me what to do. He said, Mom, don't wear a watch anymore. And I went, what? And my husband had just bought me this really cool watch. He goes, Mom, no, don't wear a watch anymore. I don't want you to get caught up in the illusion of time. Now, this was early on in my spiritual path. I had no idea what he was talking about.
It would probably sounded quite wacko.
Absolutely wacko. And I said, well, how am I going to be on time? And he said, you will always be on time. He said, but what that allows you to do is to live in the moment. He said, when you live in the moment, there's no room for the past, regrets. There's no room for the worry of the future. You live with joy. It's called the holy instant. And that's, if we can learn to live in that bliss, which is really hard to do because we're very linear, but that was one of his first lessons. And, I'm still trying to learn that and to let the past go. And when you learn to trust spirit, that spirit's the one driving the bus and not you, you really do get into a flow. And so that has been a blessing. But Robbie has told.
I just wanted to add something here. I run into that a lot. If someone dies, I am not falling apart. I am not the end of the world. And people have sometimes criticized me for seeming to be not compassionate. How come I'm not wailing at the wall?
Yeah.
Because I have tasted the other side. I believe in it. I believe in soul groups. I believe in past lives. I believe in soul contracts. And so to me, for example, my girlfriend's husband died unexpectedly in January. And while we were there waiting for the funeral director to come get the body, and her daughter was there sobbing, and I said, this was an incredible gift he gave her. And of course, shocked everybody. They thought and because she had been so stressed over finances, very stressed, every day stressed. And his life insurance made her life free of financial worry.
Yeah.
And I know his health was failing. I know that he was disconnecting. And I know that this was an incredible gift. He chose to leave without burdening with a long, drawn out illness. And at the time, he could still give her freedom from the financial stress.
Yeah.
So there's beauty in that and a richness. So Robbie has really taught you a lot.
Yeah. We don't understand, or we look at death so different in the Western world. If we truly, and those of us that believe and have had experiences like this, when you know where the people that transition, I don't say really that he died, he crossed or he transitioned, and what they are now surrounded with and by, and that's our true home. A lot of other cultures, especially Eastern cultures, they celebrate when someone passes, but we don't. But, the other thing too, that Robbie told me, which helped me pull myself out of this, he said, Mom, I want to thank you for not staying in grief, because I had a mission. So, he helped me get out of that grief. He said, but when people stay in, or if you were to stay in the level of grief, he says, you become my unintended victim. And that would hold me back from completing what it was that I needed to do. And I heard that and I go, oh, I'm fine. No grief here, And then he also said to me, Well, no, actually, it was my dad in a reading. But because I handled the passing of my son the way I did, because my dad lost a son, my grandfather lost a son, and my great grandfather lost a son.
Wow.
And he said, you broke the karma. And
Mhm.
so the future generations will not have to experience that. And you've healed the past generations.
Yeah.
So that's what we need. We just need to expand our view of passing and lives, and because
Mhm.
I mean, we're born to die, we're all going to go through this, and we're going to, I believe in multiple lives and reincarnation too, but then you throw in the parallel universes and everything
Oh
simultaneous,
yeah. Yeah.
and it warps your mind, right, trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
But it's always a lesson, and Robbie tells me, Mom, and he's described past lives that we've had together. Do I have time for a quick story on that?
You do.
I have a dear friend who channels Robbie, and she's a medium and a channel. And so one day, every once in a while, I still have my pity parties. And I was having my pity party because all my friends were being grandparents, and I went, my daughter's special needs, so I won't have grandchildren with her. And I thought, oh, I really wanted grandchildren. And they were having so much fun. And so I've shed a few tears. And then I said, all right, I'm fine. Right after that, my friend calls and she said, hey, she goes, Robbie just came in and he wanted me to tell you something. She said, he showed me a past life and you were like what's the word I want? The matron of this estate somewhere in France or England. He was your son. He got married. His wife died in childbirth. He and the child moved back to your estate and you raised the grandchild. And he said, you were a great grandmother. And she said, why is he telling me that? And I said, because I just had this pity party that I wasn't a grandmother. But he was telling me, you've been a grandmother. It's just not meant to be in this lifetime. I just found that so incredible.
That was beautiful. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the place we could take our last break. So let's do that. And then I have so many other things to ask you. So we'll take a quick break. I'm Doc Martin, Maximum Medicine. We're back. Unfortunately, this is our last segment. Darn it. I'm here with Nancy Myers, and I have loved hearing how she connected with orbs and deepened into spirit. So, Nancy, it seems as if you went from a person who didn't know anything about being a medium, and now you've deepened into seeing the connections, feeling the energies of the other side. Tell me a little bit about that transition. How has it been for you?
I mentioned earlier when we want to know where our kids are, that they're safe. Well, I wanted to know, Robbie wasn't home when he passed. He was with my brother-in-law. And I wasn't with him. So I wanted to know, Robbie, what happened? How did you go through this process? Who greeted you? And so I started reading books. And then one book would literally be brought to me, and so I was led on this path. And then I decided, I want to do this. I was hearing about moms who had these amazing dreams or amazing connections. And I thought, I want to do that. So I started taking workshops and studying and going to the big trade shows or conventions. But it was always, again, divinely orchestrated because it was always done the right information at the right time. If I were to read some of the books I'm reading right now in the beginning, I would have said, oh, forget it. That's over my head. But everything came as it should have. And I I made an agreement with spirit that, you can guide my life. I just show me what to do. So again, it goes back to the surrender. I wasn't doing it to become famous. I wasn't doing it, to make money. I wanted to connect to my son. And that's how it started. And then everything else fell into place, where now I have clients and I'm doing this. But
Mhm.
that's how it started. And it's been literally, a 14-year journey.
How has your husband evolved and watched you connect, and how has that gone for him?
I love that you asked this question, especially for a parent who has lost a child, because sometimes it can do two things to a marriage. Either you become closer together or it rips you apart because you get into the blame game or, whatever. Or like me, you start off on a spiritual path and you need a supportive husband, which I have. My husband, this was all new to him, but my son was instrumental in one reading. He showed the medium a book called The Course in Miracles, and I don't know if you've heard that. And he
Mhm.
said, "This is for Dad." And so I showed it to my husband. I said, "This is what your son said." I played the thing, and he said, "Okay, I'll check it out." Well, it resonated with him, and it started him on his. And the hook, real quick story, in that first reading that I got with the medium, because my husband was not on board with mediums at all. After the funeral and everything, my son was a drummer, and it was quiet, our first quiet moment after the service. And my husband hugged me and he said, he said, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and James Morrison all died at 27. He said, now they have a drummer. And
Mm.
when I got the reading from the medium, she said, your son says to tell your husband he's looking up famous musicians, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin. And when I told my husband that, he said, how would she know that? No one was there. So that opened the door. But then him giving, now my husband's, we are on parallel spiritual paths, but not the same. He's
Mhm.
more of the heady physics, science kind of guy. He's also now into the Urantia book. But mine is like, I don't care about that. I want to talk to spirit, So, but in fact, I did a podcast and he was my guest. My son came in and said, Dad, you need to go on the podcast with Mom, because he wasn't going to do that, but he did. And he's helped a lot of men, who's,
Wonderful.
yeah. So that's how it affected him.
I love that. I love that you guys each got to grow from this. Yeah.
Yep.
So Nancy, you have a podcast and you see clients.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell people how to connect with you?
Absolutely. I have the podcast is on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, but it's all the recordings are on my website, which is called theorbconnection.com. So the all pictures are on there. What I do is very visual, so but I don't have any pictures for you today. But you can go on my website and see a lot of the pictures, all the past podcasts. And if you need to contact me, you can contact me through that, or you can go. My Facebook page is the Orb Connection, and everything's posted on there too.
And you do work with clients.
Yes, I can do readings over Zoom, or my husband, he built me a she shed, and I call it my spirit shack. So it's my office. So I see clients in my spirit shack. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you see clients, do you always have to have a photograph in order to show them the orbs around them?
Well, yeah, I have to.
Mm-hmm.
People ask me, do you see orbs with your eyes? And yes, on about 5 or 6 occasions, I have seen the orbs. That's why I know they're not just dust in a photograph, which a lot of people try to dismiss. But and I give them a copy of the picture. So I have services where I do orb sessions. I do services where I do oracle card readings. I do Reiki sessions, or a combination thereof.
So what else has Robbie shared with you about the other side? A lot of what you've talked about, I'm sure that you've read Michael Newton's book, the Journey of Souls
Mm-hmm.
and all the work he did with hypnotherapy clients.
Mm-hmm.
What else has Robbie shared with you just briefly in our last minutes?
Well, he's confirmed a lot because he says, Mom, when everybody gets over here, he said, we have a party. Everybody gets a party. And my son loved parties. So he said, let me explain it like this. He said, picture Disneyland. He said, when you first walk into Disneyland, you have the main square, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so that's where everybody is. You see all your past ancestors and loved ones, and we have a party. He said, but then everybody goes off into their own land, whether it's Frontierland or Tomorrowland or, whatever it is, or which level that you're working on. So I know that Robbie's on a higher plane or level. I hate to rate things, but just a higher vibrational level. And so he goes back. So when I asked him, I said, am I keeping you earthbound? Asking you to stay with me.
From evolving.
Yeah. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
no. Number one, spirits can be at 100 different places, 1,000 different places at the same time, because
Mm-hmm.
everything happens at the same time. But he said, if I'm coming from up here, he said, picture of it that I'm taking an elevator down. And if I'm going to bring in your dad, I'll stop at the second floor, pick him up, and then come back down to the Disneyland main square. And that's where we both can communicate from you. But so he walks back and forth. He did tell me a little bit about his life review. He did have a life review. And again, he emphasized that there was nobody, there were like a panel there, but they didn't speak. They were just there to help guide him. And he was his judge. He was his jury, which is interesting the way he put that, because my son was a prosecutor. And then he also he's told me about past lives, and he's told me about reincarnation. And he said, Mom, when we reincarnate, he said, you don't take all your soul in with you. It's too much. Your higher self stays there. He said, but think of it as a tree. And he said, each lifetime is a leaf, and then it goes back to the tree. So all those personalities, all those leaves remain so that other loved ones can recognize them. Because one of my concerns was, what if you go to another life? How am I going to recognize you? And he said, our personalities stay. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, he also told me about the Akashic records, and he went in there and loved those. So he confirmed a lot of stuff, that we hear about.
It's interesting. And I'm always stunned by, we have all this data from people like Michael Newton, you telling things from Robbie, people with NDEs. And my biggest grumble is science, the mainstream science still isn't ready to open up and accept it. But yeah, we'll get there.
We are. And I think we are. I think we're moving, together. Science and spirituality are finally on a trajectory. Yeah. Yeah.
So Nancy, in our last 1 or 2 minutes, what messages do you have for our listeners from what you've learned?
Robbie gave me a message once, and he said, Mom, the more you believe, the more you believe. And so what part of my mission is just knock down those walls. Just imagine what's out there. Explore, because it truly is magical. One thing that I learned being on this path that is so comforting is how much help is there for us. All we have to do is ask. And so, just broaden your horizons a little bit. And if you want to start getting orbs, then grab a digital camera. I do not recommend a cell phone camera because they have too many filters on them. They filter out the infrared, and it's not good for the orbs. Cheapy little digital camera. Always leave the flash on. Go out with the intent to meet your orbs, and they will be there as long as you believe.
So you're saying two things that I have said repeatedly. If you don't, the very first, and I do this in terms of with relationship to healing, suspend disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't get to belief, at least suspend disbelief. And then the other thing I say over and over, that when I started studying shamanism, what did it gain me? The knowledge, the deep-seated knowing that we have helpers in the unseen world and that we're not alone.
Yeah.
And that learning for me in my lifetime is so comforting and so enriching. So thank you for what you do, helping people see that beauty and that they're not alone and that it's really a rich life, even if it's not in the carnate world. So.
Yep. And I thank my son.
Yes. Thank you, Robbie, for being willing to keep speaking up and running the show.
Yep.
All right, everybody, this is Maximum Medicine. Nancy Myers, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
You guys can look her up on the orbconnection.com and read her books and connect with her and get out there and communicate. It's all out there for you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening.
You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.